How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Well, I'm surviving my our orange sky out here. I don't know where you're located, but in Silicon
It's
Valley, our sky is like super orange for some reason, and it's been like that all day long. It's been very weird. It's like living on another planet.
yeah, no, I'm based in San Francisco and it is equally ominous here. Feels like 2020 has been a rough year.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of the old Star Trek episodes where they used to color the sky a different color so you knew you were on an alien planet. It's because it wasn't blue. It was like purple or orange or green or whatever.
For
So that's
sure.
what it feels like
No,
today. So strange. So how are you?
absolutely. I'm doing all right.
Good.
It's been a busy few months.
Yeah, I know, especially for this industry, right? So why don't you start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you do, and we'll go from there.
Sure, sure. So I'm Ajita Menon. I was recently appointed actually as the permanent president and CEO for Calbright College. And for folks who don't know, Calbright College is the first online community college that's competency-based, that's focused on working adults here in California, or as the case may be, increasingly folks who are economically displaced. And in need of more flexible opportunities to upskill, to reskill, and to find themselves better positioned for the labor market.
Now, do you find that most of your students are people who've already had careers in other areas, or do you also get people who are right out of high school?
So we actually primarily serve an adult student market. So in the early enrollments that we have, the college is still very new, less than a year of opening its doors to students. The 90% of our students are above the age of 25. So it really tailors towards those individuals who, again, are juggling multiple responsibilities, whether it's childcare or elder care or having to work multiple jobs under those kinds of conditions. So largely that, and largely folks who have not, who don't have an educational credential. So a number of folks who may have had an interaction with the post-secondary system, but who either are lacking a credential or degree, or in some cases, folks who are, as you described, looking to find their way into a new industry or a new profession.
So it's you're focused on sort of reskilling. Sounds like that's the key piece. And what would you say makes Calbright more innovative than sort of your typical community college or other educational institution?
I think the main thing is we're one of the few community colleges that actually have a population-centric approach. So it's the first one that was created by the legislature to focus on job skills. And it's significant because it has a lot to do with the barriers that exist in the traditional academic systems that often don't work well for the populations that we're talking about. So folks who maybe can't adhere to an academic calendar, or are working Monday through Friday at the time that classes are scheduled, or may need maybe have smaller increments of time to commit to their educational journey, and maybe that needs to happen in a way that's more asynchronous, as it does at our institution. I think that's the main thing. A lot of traditional colleges and universities are on a very conventional model. That conventional model was really built for individuals who were matriculating right out of high school and who required that. Even the words we use to describe the learning that occurs at conventional institutions, we say pedagogy, when actually the science of learning for adults is very different, right? And we think about it in terms of the andragogy, the services, the supports that are actually needed to support individuals who are further along in their lives and in their careers.
So how do you provide this flexibility? I know there's certain limitations that you have to have certain number of hours of study to get certain certifications. I mean, how do you provide that kind of flexibility without having, forcing them to spend giant blocks of time in a school?
Yeah, we're learning that and learning how to do that well. I think, the way that the CBE model, the competency-based education model works at our institution, but also more generally, is built around the idea that what you're doing along the way in a self-paced journey is learning and then being supported by faculty and instructors in the learning process to coach you when you get stuck, to otherwise provide interventions in that process. But you're not sitting in a lecture for a defined period of time at a defined period of time, but you're being supported kind of through that engagement with faculty. And what your aim is to actually demonstrate that mastery. So the skills that you get are not just high level learning objectives that you may or may not have gotten as a result of sitting in a classroom and may or may not be absorbing what a lecturer is providing to you, but the ability for you to actually demonstrate that you understand the skills and the concepts in the content that is being taught. So it is an area that is regulated, especially for purposes of things like federal financial aid and accreditation and other things like that. So there's important guardrails around those kinds of innovations, but the spirit and the intent and the engagement in which learning occurs is fundamentally different.
Right. Well, so is this self-directed then? Can I take as much time as I want to get through?
So the original cohort was kind of open-ended, and we let folks in and said you could sort of go as slow or fast as you wanted. And part of that we had the flexibility to do because we aren't yet participating in the federal student aid programs. We're pre-accreditation. What this really taught us was an understanding of what we think the patterns of progression are or could be. And it's helpful because then what we want the interaction with students to be going forward is to get a sense of, to set for them an expectation around how long something might take based on the time commitment that they might make or might be able to make. So if a program we estimate to take a year's time, if you're doing 30 hours a week, if you did it half time, these are kind of the expectations around progression. So it helps us get to greater flexibility around those things without completely taking the guardrails off and, in ways that then I think make it difficult for folks to structure their own time and their own lives. So it's a model that tries to maximize flexibility, but not in the absence of structure. So not quite self-directed, but we want folks to understand what that commitment is, and we want folks to be able to guide how they make it.
So you do have live classes then. So there are live classes that occur where somebody has to schedule and be there at a specific time.
No, there's not that. So it is self-paced in the sense that the content is all there. You have very structured engagements with your faculty and with your advisors and coaches. So there's points in time and when that check-in occurs, and then there's a determination if folks need additional tutoring or a different kind of intervention or support that can happen.
Now, were you always online, or did COVID drive you guys online?
No, we've always been online. So again, by design, by statute, this was meant to be, tech fueled. And I use that instead of saying online because I think online covers up all matters of sin sometimes. And so just putting static content in a digital format does not a high quality experience make. And so this is very much about being able to leverage technology in ways that can achieve greater personalization for learners who can't make it to a bricks and mortar institution, or who again otherwise may have scheduled commitments that prevent them from a traditional college experience.
Yeah, and I actually love this model because I think this is the future of education. This is exactly where we need to go. But for some reason, people still look down upon it as, not a real education, or not the right, it's not that it has the same level as Stanford or whatever, right? I mean, why? What do you think is holding us back from being there? Plus, what do you think is so great about the in-person piece that everyone thinks needs to be part of all this types of education?
Yeah, those are great questions. I mean, I think I'll take the latter one first. I think people assume, because the way online has happened before, which is often poor quality, that they use that to say it's not an effective modality, instead of saying, what are the conditions under which using technology in our educational system works? And that doesn't need to be 100% disconnected from humans. It doesn't have to be 100% disconnected from place. In fact, technology can be used to enhance services, and technology can be used to have reach a greater number of individuals on a more regular basis. And that's a very human powered activity at our college and at ones who do this well. So I think what people are missing in this is that it's not an either or, but it's the quality conditions around the way that you design an experience for somebody that technology can help you with. And that has to be the main focal point of how we even talk about the situation that we find ourselves in, where there has been this rapid deployment of online, but mostly it has not been in a way that has rethought or retooled any of the parts of the student experiences that are inherently broken for many of the populations we're talking about, the conditions that actually prevent their success. And often we find ourselves in the category of even victim blaming them, like those folks can't learn online, or those folks require so much more service, right? This very deficit mindset around them, instead of an approach where we are overly focused on where we need to be thinking about what is that experience that someone needs to have, what are the assets they already and skills they already bring to the table, and how do we use technology to supplement that experience for them in ways that engage them, in ways that support their progression, and in ways that honor the goals, the objectives, and the commitment they come to us with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I find really funny is that we seem to have been thrust into this mode where now everything's become online, right? And we haven't really thought through the better way of doing it. I think this is what a lot of people say about in-person interaction. They say, oh, in-person interaction is always better than remote interaction. But the only reason we feel that way is because we've done that for so long. We've done that since we were, in caves, right? We haven't gotten to the point where we've been able to improve technical interaction, or this kind of interaction, better than what we have in person. And for some reason, people think that it's still better. But I think building something up from the ground up to focus on the technology and be online first, you can do so much more than you could with something that is, you force people to go somewhere and do something. If you think about everything around, I mean, I just did it's funny, I'm on the Stanford LEAD program, which is very similar sort of thing. And it's all online, except for there are a few live courses. And one of the last projects we did with them was doing an argument on for and against working from home. And the funny thing was that we found very little evidence that going into an office and working was actually good in any way. I mean, there was problems with the commute, there was health problems, there was just so much on the positive side of working from home all the time that we couldn't understand how anybody could argue against it. So I could also say the same thing about education, is that, how can anybody say that remote education is like way better, if you ask me, than any kind of face-to-face education?
Yeah, it's even, you sort of asked me, like, why do I think there's such a barrier to adoption and to expansion of the modality? And, I think a large part of it is fear. It's almost this existential feeling that there was an ascribed value to conventional education and what it afforded somebody, especially in a 4-year degree. And folks feel like it's reductionist if you change that role in any way. And the role in online for faculty has to change, because it is more of a coaching interaction. It is more, there's more creativity required. There's more learning that happens on the part of the person who's supposed to be the expert. And what it had always meant to be an expert was not that you were an expert in teaching necessarily, but that you were an expert in a subject matter area or something like that. And here, expertise and content comes from such a variety of different sources and is dynamic and changing all the time, that the value you bring to students is actually something quite different, right? Maybe it's your professional network. Maybe it's in supporting somebody through content that you've been before. Maybe it's a different kind of coaching support. And the fact that there's just such a fundamental shift in what that role needs to be to do this kind of work successfully with individuals, I think that's a really, really scary thing. And for an industry like higher education that's been so insulated from any changes in market conditions, any changes even in terms of technological advancement, it's very easy to bunker. It is way harder to confront, ways in which what we do may not be the best for every type of student, and the need that we see to change and adapt what we do, and how, the high degree of difficulty around that. We talk a lot about adaptability as like one of the preeminent, most important skills for the future of work, but that involves our own workforces, which I think is a part of the set of challenges you see.
Yeah. Well, what do you think has to happen for Calbright to go up there, become like the Stanford of online education? What needs to happen? I mean, obviously Stanford's been around for a lot longer, but like I said, as far as I'm concerned, online education, especially from the scratch, built from the ground up, is better in almost all ways. Because I mean, if you think about things that could go remote, education and most of work is more likely to be better done remotely, so you can cut out all that unnecessary travel and all that stuff. So what needs to happen, do you think, for Calbright to get to that level of, well, yeah, I want to send my kids to Calbright because that's where you should go?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we have to be able to demonstrate real value in the proof of concept, right? So I think part of that is what we're engaged in right now, which is, unlike a college, we're not going to flip a switch and say, okay, let's get to 10,000 enrollments overnight, and you're all going to go through the same widget machine, and we're going to churn out workforce ready folks. Scale is absolutely a part of the strategy, but the first part has to be addressing and understanding how we take certain segments of our population, especially those who are economically disconnected, and move them a certain distance, right? How to get them from a point A to a point B. And there are large cross sections of folks that the workforce system will leave behind. And we learned this as a student of the last recession and economic recovery, someone who participated a lot in thinking about how to structure solutions at the state level and at the local level from the federal perspective. We have to be thinking much more thoughtfully about what that experience needs to be and how that can be done in the course of a year, et cetera. And so we're very focused on leveling up the quality of what we do, working in a very focused way, but also in a very evaluative and analytical way. So really being able to have more robust R&D capacities, as the college was designed to have, in ways that allow us to test multiple types of models. That the point is, we'll repeat the same mistakes that were made in poor quality online education, with poor incentives, like in the large scale for-profit ed space, or we will replicate and revert back to parts of the existing model that don't work as we try to seek to be so similar to it. So really having fidelity to the population that we're serving, understand the needs, conditions, and motivations for their success, and really having a deep understanding of what the labor market offers for them, what skilling is required to get us there, get them there, kind of to that first level. And I don't think we're as thoughtful about that. We use labor market information in very, very select ways. We do a lot where we listen to employers, but we don't hear or understand the broader context of the business decisions or operational decisions that are being made that are actually defining the skills requirements that are needed to get those jobs. That's why we have that constant misalignment between an employer says this, a college spends 10 to 24 months setting up a program. And by the time their first graduates are through that program, the need evaporates. And we will never get ahead of that curve unless we start thinking about it differently and kind of more categorically. So I think a real condition of our success is being able to show the many different models that address key challenges and pain points that folks are experiencing now, being displaced from the workforce or even in the workforce themselves, to those outcomes. And I think that, that is what we will diligently spend the next couple of years doing. And I don't think doing so impedes our ability to scale. I think it actually is an enhancing factor, that we have something that has a pathway to scale because of its viability in terms of, for lack of a better word, the product itself.
Right. Right. Well, I know it takes 6 years now to get a 4-year degree. So my question's always been, why does it take so long? I mean, if you think about the number of hours of education you need to get to a certain level of education, why does it even take 4 years? I mean, why does it even take 2 years? Why does it even take 1 year? Look at the success of coding boot camps and things like that. I mean, you have coding boot camps that go 12 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months or whatever. And then when you get out, you're pretty much know enough to be able to pick up a job. So, I mean, who came up with these durations that you need to be in school X amount of time before, it's a valid degree or something like that?
Yeah, no, it definitely is a throwback to a time-based approach to learning that was suited for a much smaller group of individuals who are accessing post-secondary education. And when they expanded that model, it wasn't expanded in a way that kind of thoughtfully looked at the trajectory of these things. So everything became added on like a Christmas ornament, new requirements, new responsibilities. And all of the decisions were made from an institutional perspective as opposed to an end user perspective. And so you confound, for many people who aren't the conventional college student of years past, the ability for them to traverse through that time-based journey. And at the end of it, you often have this dissatisfaction with employers and others who say, yeah, they graduate with that 4-year degree, but they're not job ready. They're not ready for anything related to what the workforce needs. And because that model has perpetuated just sort of absent any real kind of critical self-reflection or incentive for change, by and large, there's great innovative examples in many pockets across the country I could name. But in general, that has been the case. That has not been, there's been no incentive for that change to occur, for time to be less. And the other piece of that is, of course, the financing model. So the current business model favors the incumbent and the incumbent institution, and it requires that that individuals spend the money on that time, which we know is causing tremendous problems at the back end of the process, where we find such a sorry, a second. Okay, such a disconnect between the value of that degree and the sort of debt required to even enter the labor market at a mid-scale or a middle of the range job wage-wise.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit, let's go a little under the covers here and tell me a little bit about how you guys innovate, because it sounds to me that you were saying that you get the opportunity, because you're using the technology the way you're using it, is that you can pivot to different models as they can become more effective. So how does that feedback get into the system, and then how do you pivot? I mean, tell us a little bit about the technology and stuff like that.
Yeah, we've, so, we're still implementing kind of the baseline technologies that are necessary for any online educational delivery system. So, we're in the process of implementing an ERP system and our student information system, and a customer, we've just a few months ago implemented our customer relationships management system, and our learning management system has been in place for some time. So part of it is the foundational systems that you have. Part of it is the technologies that you choose. And we're thinking about augmenting different technologies to get our students different experiences, whether it's a simulated work-based learning experience or something like that. So there's lots of cool stuff happening on the technology side that we think enhances learning and enhances the demonstration of kind of skill mastery that we want folks to walk away with. But the bigger question is really the data analytic layer underneath everything that we do. So, traditionally this has been relegated to institutional research offices, and their primary responsibility has often been compliance oriented, right? They do all the reporting to the federal level, to the state level for purposes of accreditation. And a few really amazing offices I've seen have been able to transform themselves into more of an analytical machine across the organization. And part of it is there have been intervening technologies like predictive analytic models and other things like that in higher ed that have helped add some precision to data-based decision making and also data-based intervention design. But if you think about data across the entire organization as really the lifeblood that also allows you to assess the efficacy of what you're doing in terms of like a student moving through a program, but also help clue you into places where you need to be enhancing parts of the student experience and really directing your energy and activity to that. That capability is what allows you to continue to iterate and continue to more flexibly design for higher levels of quality and higher and better improvements to the student experience. And so I feel like in higher ed, sometimes we forget that. So we either we go with an OPM full-scale provider and we outsource all of our online activities, or we buy an LMS and then we try to integrate it to the systems, but we downplay the importance of that data flow across the entire student experience. And that's, I think, what we've been building that, and we're continuing to build that for a few months now. That's ultimately what's going to position us to be able to be receptive to change, and being able to staff the college and having a responsibility to staff the college to support those functions. I think is also critically important, because it forces a breakdown in the traditional silos that get erected that also prevent for a coherent or cohesive student experience.
Right. So you're saying that the software that you've built itself does do that kind of morphing. So as the student progresses, they get a different set of curricula, or do they still have the same curriculum?
No. So the LMS that we're using, so we haven't built our own LMS. We've acquired technologies that we've sourced technologies that we're knitting together in a particular way to deliver the experience. And the element, we have an LMS vendor. The LMS vendor has adaptive capabilities, and we're not yet there on the adaptive thing. I have a particular viewpoint of that because I've also seen that go very wrong. You have to have a very clean and tight sense of, what kind of scaffolded learning goes into an adaptive model in order to build that out in a high quality way. So I think we'll eventually get to the hyper adaptive version of things, but the technologies I believe are a little bit of a second order matter. I think the first order matter is having an understanding of what an objective around that experience and having a way of analyzing whether you are meeting the mark on that, and everything else gets built on top of that. So it's funny to hear somebody who's running an online college say the tech is not the most important thing, and functioning tech is obviously critical. But there's a first order set of things that I think are really table stakes to successful online delivery.
Oh yeah, but I agree with you. The technology is not the most important thing. It's never the most important thing, because anything you think of can be implemented with the technology. The key is thinking of it, right? And doing the right thing. So a little bit earlier, you were talking about outcomes. So are all your courses designed the same way, as that you picked a specific outcome which has to do with getting a specific kind of role in the specific company? So do you have, is there anything open-ended, or is it all like, okay?
No, that's what we're moving towards. We're moving towards the more open-ended now. Initially, the college launched with 3 programs: medical coding, IT support, and cybersecurity. And the approach that we were taking at that time, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, pre-closure of the economy, and enjoying the full labor market that we had, was really our ability to prepare people for very specific roles where we saw projected demand over the past over the past 5 years or so. This moment has been very clear. While we can position people for those roles, we can't obviously control what's happening in the hiring market. And so this situation that we find ourselves in, so brave new world, so fundamentally different, has caused us to sort of reassess our thinking around it. And the reassessment is really about how do we get people actually the broadest set of skills and some domain expertise in an industry to get them reemployed in many cases, to get that first line level of economic stability that is foundational for any kind of future mobility, and continue that relationship with them through additional upskilling or through connection to one of the other 115 colleges in the system that may have programs already in certain areas, those kinds of things. But I sort of mentioned that because I think the view on it has changed, because now we are having to confront this real-time situation of folks who are in industries that are not likely to rebound, and we'll see kind of this industrial displacement that we need to be attending to. And those are folks that have a tremendous amount of assets and skills, having been in the workforce and engaged in a lot of different types of activities that carry skills with them, that with the right amount of structured training could move swiftly into another industry. I think of industries like retail, where we're starting to look a little closely. What are the skills that are present in frontline bricks and mortar retail workers that actually help us translate, because it's the right acumen for customer service generally, but in a new context and in occupations where new job roles exist for similar skills, but with a digital enhancement. So it's actually, when we think about our future offerings, we actually think about it in terms of those types of activities for large cross sections of individuals that we're trying to facilitate, again, getting from a point A to point B, where the duration is not years and years of their life, but something more manageable.
Are you planning on releasing any kinds of like micro degrees like Udemy, or is it Udemy has micro degrees? One of these other online.
There's a lot of micro credentialing places out there. Yeah.
Credentialing. Yeah. Do you have anything like that? Or are you planning on trying to create any standards in that space?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of strong, credible standards out there already. I think the biggest challenge with micro credentials, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but is the coherence in the labor market. So this is the same issue with badging. It has a value only insofar as that value is validated by the end user, which is not the student in this case, but the employer. And when we think about that, the best part about doing a skills-based competency-based education approach is that the grain size of what you're doing is actually the skill level. And that allows for a lot of portability and a lot of reconfiguration of what that wrapper is, whether it's a degree wrapper or whether it is an industry recognized credential or something shorter that can have a demonstrated labor market value, which you can also construct around. So I think we have to be ready for the possibility that we can do all three of those types of things. I think the more important thing, and the careful nature in which I would think about the micro-credentialing environment, is it has to be in a way that is an understood signal in the labor market and is absorbed by the labor market accordingly. Otherwise, we're preparing folks with credentials that don't have the utility and that we need. We're failing them because it's not coherently being received in the market.
Right. Well, I remember this. I mean, this micro-credentialing has gone on forever, right? I mean, I remember a long time ago, there used to be specific, especially in the technology space, you were SAP certified or Novell NetWare certified, or you had a certification for a specific piece of software or technology that you were supposedly an expert in, and that's what you hired, right? I mean, I had to hire somebody who knows this stuff inside and out, and that's what that credential meant. But that's totally changing.
Yeah.
Right. It's completely different.
It is completely different. And I think there's, I was gonna say, I think there's more of a willingness for employers to start to embrace some of these things, because they're having a hard time filling certain types of roles. And often there still continues to be a disconnect, again, between that credential and what an employer needs on day one for somebody who comes out of any kind of program or
Oh yeah. Well, don't talk to me about the talent acquisition market. That's broken too.
it's very broken. And actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'll use this opportunity to also say, this is an important one to figure out for higher education institution, which is how far into that market do you wade? And, I'll say we often, as higher education institutions, err on the wrong side, which is like completely disconnected. But there's also a danger in going too far into thinking we can fix a lot of what's broken in the hiring and talent acquisition market. And what I'm finding, and what's been great, and we're partnering with an organization like this called Opportunity at Work, is that there are other folks fixing some of the problems in that market. And I think the right move there is for us to be able to understand how we participate and interact to maximize the potential opportunities for our students relative for folks who are working already with employers in that market, that we're not reinventing that aspect of the solution set because we're not best positioned to do it.
Yeah. Well, if you ask me, the whole resume interview thing should just go away.
Yeah.
It is so inaccurate. Somebody can interview really well. They could have a great resume, and as soon as you get them on board, they're no good. In fact, I'm a big proponent of going back to some kind of apprenticeship model where you say, hey, just bring somebody on board. Let's see how they
show
work.
me what you can do. Yeah.
Exactly. Show me what you can do. And then by the same token, I mean, it's the same with the education. It's like prepare someone to take on that role and then integrate those two things together. Because if the end result of your education is supposed to be work, then, how far can you overlap those things? I mean, I know there's lots of universities like Waterloo, et cetera. They have apprenticeship programs, right? Where, I mean, anybody who's been to those programs, they get snapped up like that. And I mean, nobody ever gets left behind from a program like that. So, I mean, are you starting to see more work with employers too? Like you said, you were partnering with some companies that were doing that, or some groups that were doing that. Are you doing that stuff directly yourselves as well?
So we are not, we're moving away from like the direct apprenticeship model, preparing people for those types of programs, getting folks competitive into those programs. I think that's a piece that we're going to continue to hold on to. That full apprenticeship model is, in this economic period, is aspirational. And largely because it requires such a strong commitment from employers. And so while I think it's definitely an aspect of like the multiple models that will continue to expand upon, you have to think very carefully about the kind of spectrum of those work-based learning opportunities, and whether for employers the juice is worth the squeeze on an actual apprenticeship program, or if there's some lower fidelity way of giving people actual work-based experience that translates into some level of validation and assurance that are provided by models like apprenticeship. So I think, like, should there be more apprenticeship models? Absolutely. I think we certainly in certain industries would see that as viable for us as a model to engage in as a college. And then there's a whole other category of areas where I think we might overestimate the level of commitment and mechanics that are actually needed to run those programs on the employer side. And that's been an interesting confrontation between like this theory that we have of how it could work and the best way for it to work, and what you actually confront in terms of real behavior when you get to that actual programmatic set of decisions. So we've been, we were leaning heavily into that. And then given that the economic conditions shifting all around us, it started to become clear we need to, that's a goal, but can't be a primary yet.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that, I'm working with HR folks, and they're always saying, oh my God, I can never find the right people. But then their approach to finding the right people is the wrong approach. And when you say, here's a better approach, they don't want to take that approach because it's not what they've always done. So, like something's got to change somewhere for the approach to do better. So one thing
early on in this process, we did a lot of deep work with hiring managers to better understand, that if we're solving a two-sided market challenge, which this is, how do we get it there? And they all had little hacks for for how they would test, right? So they would interview, but they would also be like, and then I give them an Excel test, and here's what they have to do in the Excel test. So those are important lessons for us, because that's part of what can be built in upfront in the design of programmatic work that we do and that we send our students through.
Well, it's like a design thinking approach where you're observing
Absolutely.
the customer and you're going, well, what do they do? How are they getting around this problem? And when they put this little hack in place, you go, aha, there's an opportunity right there to do something better.
It is.
So I want to ask you about evangelizing your model with companies that your students are going to. I mean, how are you doing that, and what's the response been?
Yeah, I think it's hard. You know, we spoke in the good employment times. We spoke to well over 100 employers across a range of industries, heavily focused on tech, which is where 2 out of our 3 inaugural programs were. And especially with the larger companies, it's quite a process. Like, if you think colleges have bureaucracies, employers have bureaucracies too. So I think we learned a tremendous amount from those conversations, even as COVID was befalling us, and we were understanding that the calculus in their decision making had changed. And so when we go and talk with employers now, it's first to listen and to understand much more about how they're viewing their set of hiring decisions. And that helps us understand more quickly what the real viability is for our students to have real opportunities there. But as a general matter, again, I think if it's not real feasible for a single college to be holding all of the employer relationships, right? Certainly there's a lot of developmental conversations that happens, very labor intensive. It's hard to replicate. There's a lot of work that happens in this kind of space called contract education, which is very customized, which is also inefficient for a college to provide. But there's a lot around that is actually already self-organized on that side of the market, and really being connected into that intermediary market is actually a much more efficient approach for us to get real reliable information about how hiring is made and where hiring priorities are, and a way for us to sort of leverage what's out there already in terms of that infrastructure. And in California in particular, we're thinking a lot more about how we do that in partnership with regions, with other community colleges who are anchors in some of those regions, in other parts of the public workforce development infrastructure, again, so that we're addressing the gaps in those spaces, as opposed to, reinventing a whole cloth new model in a way that's a little non sequitur.
It's interesting. You should, one of the things, I just wanted to ask a side question on it. How much of the companies that you're working with are actually doing any kind of workforce planning to know, okay, in 18 months, 24 months, whatever, this is the skill set we're going to need? I mean,
it's a good question.
Like
the answer is I don't know yet, because we just started doing some investigative research in this area across a number of different industries to better understand the current decision-making calculus for employers. And we're asking these questions like, are you planning on hiring how many? Like a lot of conditions under which hiring may or may not occur. So I would say, like, on a later date, we'll share more about that. And I'm happy to send you that once we've called through all of that.
I'd love to know that. One of my recent client meetings I was at, we had the head of innovation stood up and said, thinking about the future in these times is meaningless. And I'm like, wow.
Really? I mean, on the one hand, you understand that comment because of how much variability there is. On the other hand, you definitely find yourself fearful.
Yeah, exactly.
Of that recognition.
Exactly right. All right. Well, let's talk a bit about the future. Where do you see Calbright going next? I mean, project it 5-10 years out. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are your customers?
That's great. I think we have a combination of customers. One, I think we've established enough proof of concept out there for the employment market to understand that sub-degree talent, so folks without a 4-year degree, are filled with assets and capabilities, and they should be hiring in this market. So one, I think that's an important hurdle for us to overcome, and it only happens if we can do these big signaling things because we actually have results. So I see that as a core part of our future. I think the other thing is we have the capability to identify and then solve key aspects of large-scale challenges that hiring employers are facing. And whether that's something like employee retention, whether that's initial fit. And these are not necessarily programs that we singularly design, but that are designed in partnership with the folks who are providing supportive services and strategies to that market. So really understanding and having a positioning in terms of our role in that larger ecosystem to very smartly engage with employers in a way that is meaningful, in the way that is not too prohibitively labor intensive for us to do, because on balance, what we need to be focusing on is our student population and how we are getting them into that queue. I think we would also want to see, tens of thousands of students moving through our institutions in this way. And the thing that I'd like to see most, because I think it's important that we not ever be a standalone institution, but that we are able to also harness and leverage the best of the actual California community college system, of which at a local level, there's a tremendous amount of great work going on, but often hits a barrier on the scale side because every single college very locally is reinventing some aspect of this work. Where in some cases we can lighten that load and have a much more efficient way that unlocks the scale of the system itself. And so I really see a robust public education feature set and our college being a core part of helping identify where those challenges are occurring, working with those types of institutions, intermediaries, other parts of the public infrastructure, and providing more seamless ways for that experience to go for actual individuals. And the best thing I would love to see is an integration of those things also across our social safety net and benefit programs. So not just how we thread together education and workforce, but how we realistically find ways of connecting with folks who find themselves in a particular situation, and we provide a coherent, coherent strategy for them out of that process. So whether they hit a hard time and are on CalWorks benefits, or whether they have a 60-day WARN notice around unemployment insurance that gives us a time window around which they need to have a job or new skills to get them a job, or whatever the case may be, that each one of those types of events that happen for large cross sections of our communities across California, that they don't encounter something that is broken, but that there is a place that catches them and doesn't solve all of their problems, but provides just the right amount of programs and services and connective tissue to other parts of programs and services, that we don't see what happened in the last economic recession and recovery. We were too slow to act, and despite the investments coming down, we ourselves couldn't respond well enough or good enough for many parts of our population.
Right. Well, I'm waiting for the day when we have this kind of just-in-time learning like you see in the Matrix, where they download the ability to pilot a helicopter in like 3 seconds. Like, can we do that yet? when can we do that?
Just the microchip back here.
Yeah, it's just a microchip. Where there was this one science fiction novel I was reading a long time ago, and everybody was chipped when they were born, and whenever a question popped into their head, like it connected with an AI that was circling the planet, and it gave them the answer immediately. That's the kind of learning I want to get. So that,
wow, tech into stream of consciousness. That's amazing.
I don't want to eliminate colleges completely, but I thought, wouldn't that be cool? we're almost near that. It's like, okay, I just have to type a few things on a keyboard, and boom, I have the answer. Like we're more connected to the world's information than we've ever been. So, I mean, it's just very cool. And then
it's funny, it just shifts the skills that colleges then need to teach, right? Like right now we find ourselves constructing not just a static body of content, but like the ability to evaluate, fact from conjecture, right? This like we need new skills to navigate this new world.
Oh yeah. Do you guys have a fake news degree? You guys have a fake news degree yet?
It's a good idea. It's scary, but it's a good idea.
I was arguing that there's always been yellow journalism, right? I mean, there was always, journalism that, so let's say, stretched the truth, right? And some people are saying, well, you know what? Journalism has never been about the truth. Only recently has been about the truth, and now it's come back to being not about the truth, or whatever. It's all confusing. I mean, I just say that as long as we all are taught the sort of foundational, problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, critical analytics, all that stuff, there's foundational stuff that we're not getting taught in any other schools, and it just needs to be taught. And I mean, I'm assuming that you guys cover that too, right? I mean, that's part of your curriculum.
Yeah, we have a set of kind of 21st century essential skills, and a core part of that is being able to work there and contextually appropriate to kind of the industry that you might be working in. So, collaboration skills in a healthcare setting means something very significant and specific, also very compliance-driven industry. Getting folks ready to do to work in a field is a core part of it. Yeah.
Right. Do you also teach how to do really good Instagram filters? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but this has been an internal conversation for some time around this idea of like what does career services look like for folks where what's needed is not just like a good resume, but a digital presence of a particular kind. How do you coach people through that? That's a real thing. Like the sort of self-branding piece of it's important.
Yeah. Well, your digital presence is you. Right. I mean, it's like nobody ever meets you face to face anymore. It's all your digital presence. I know people, I work with people for years and I've never met them face to face. It's always been over Zoom or some other teleconferencing tool. So just the world is changing so fast, and it's so interesting to see that things meeting up. So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, where do they go? What do they do?
You can just email actually Ajita, Ajita at calbright.org. I obviously get flooded with emails, so I will do my best to respond. And if not, channel you to the right folks on my team.
Very cool. So is there anything particular you're looking for? So my audience is like innovators, startup founders, corporate innovation folks. Is there anything that in particular that they could help you with?
Absolutely. I think, we would love to look for folks who want to partner on some aspects of this work. In particular, we have a very specific set of ideas we'd love to explore with prospective employers who are thinking about how to get to this kind of training where we understand what it takes to do a job well, that we have kind of a co-design process around it, and that helps us get to a new program development. So we would love to open the door for folks on that front who have sharp ideas and who want to take action together on them.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. It was great talking with you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.